Anyway, so I wasn't really buying the story. And so I started kind of researching, and oddly enough, I found a case that happened the year before of a girl who supposedly did this underground adoption where she's telling people that she's killed this child, but she's telling the police, oh, it's an underground adoption. This huge news case out of Tempe, Arizona, where she was ultimately arrested, was in Florida, where John Skelton is from. I'm thinking he had heard that story and embellished it and tried to make it become his own. I looked into different Amish settlements and I put up some maps. They're all over the Northeast, Pennsylvania, Indiana. There's just a lot. You wouldn't have to go to Ohio to find one, for sure. And so then I kind of looked into the different cities, like where the truck stop was is west of where he lives. Ohio is way south. And all these cities are just so far apart for them to all fit. Now, at some point, there was a couple people who said they saw the boys. One was at a donut shop in Sandusky, which is, again, in the complete opposite direction of if you were trying to go to Ohio. But I'll put that map up. And then the other was a flea market, and I couldn't find any information about where that was located. But at least in the case of the donut shop one, she gave a description of the woman, and it was not an Amish woman. I mean, there was no bonnet, none of that. It was just a lady. And so, is this the only little boy named Tanner on the planet? I don't think so. It gives a glimmer of hope, but then it just doesn't seem to fit his story. And this pastor, Mark, and his wife, Joanne, I looked for these people online, and they don't exist. There are people with his name, but they're not pastors. And the Amish don't have pastors like we think of pastors. And there's such a tight-knit community that it's not like mainstream society where you could hide 3 boys in your house. These people build their houses together with each other. There's communal farming. There's, a lot of daily interaction between the families. It's a very small community, and they've even said everyone knows everyone in our Amish communities. You can't hide kids there. And it just doesn't seem like something that they're really into, where they're just running around trying to save society. They're trying to survive. They don't have, I don't know, I'm just rambling, but they don't have cars, phones, or cell phones and computers anyway. So, anyway, not trying to get overly emotional. It's just really irks me, this whole thing. But so, he says that he tells the boys that they're going to go live a better life on an Amish farm on the Indiana border. Remember, he said these people are from Ohio. And that they're going to get to ride on tractors and they can have the new farm boots that they've been asking for. Not sure why they would be asking for farm boots. They live in a town. But again, the locations don't line up. And do Amish people have tractors? I'm going to guess no. Oh, and so another odd thing, talking about locations, that I guess I forgot to mention, is this hospital where he went was in Wauseon, Ohio, as I believe how they pronounced it. It's quite a ways from his house, so there's no other doctor that he could have seen. Like, it's just weird, but there doesn't seem to be a logical geographic area where all these key points are taking place. They're just all over the map in opposite directions. And I guess the guy is a truck driver. So it seems like he's just weaving these stories and just pulling these random cities out of his memory. So this holiday city, apparently he had been there before, and this is nearby the area where the cell phone pings were. It was the primary focus of most of the searches. They had about 300 people down there for 3 days looking in dumpsters. Now, at some point out in this kind of wildernessy area, they found a little baseball with that year on it, just kind of sitting in the fork of a tree out in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't find any indication as to whether any of the boys were actually in Little League, but they were definitely in sports. And how did this baseball get here out in the middle of nowhere? And how much of a coincidence is it that it happened right then? So they're checking dumpsters and different things, and it doesn't seem like they really thoroughly checked some of these wilderness areas. The dumpster thing is apparently this freak, for lack of a better word, wrote a poem called The Dumpster about the death of one of his children in a dumpster. Why would you write that poem about your own child? Especially if your child didn't die in a dumpster. I mean, as his stories continue on, another individual's name is thrown in there, some guy named Mose, who is apparently connected with this group. Well, the detective actually tracks this guy down and brings him to the jail. And dude's like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know if you gave these people these kids, but they never gave them to me, and I've never even heard of these kids until 6 months ago. And just right to his face calls him out that he's lying about the whole thing. Anyway, so from kind of looking at the facts, what I came up with is that he took the boys down to this Holiday City campground area and probably hurt his ankle walking through the rocks and, embankments, whatever, to dispose of the boys. And I hate to say that because, of course it would be best if they really were with someone where they could be found later. But I don't think there was a hanging. And I think it's weird, too, because he's saying that the people in the movie were hanging people. And so this is in his head, and he's trying to scramble and come up with these stories. And, oh yeah, I tried to hang myself with a shoelace, but it didn't work, and I fell and hurt my foot. I'm just not buying it. And 2 hours go by before he goes to the hospital, at least, from when this happened. It seems to me that he's thinking, oh, I better not go to the hospital because I'm going to get caught. So he's got to come up with a story because he can't handle the pain because, he's so manly. And multiple people do describe him as a coward, no class, no guts, narcissistic, selfish. I mean, the guy's... something's not right there. And you can see it, and everyone who knows him has said it. And at this point, even his parents are refusing to go visit him. And in the beginning of the case, they're acting like they're totally supportive and, oh, we believe him. But they made multiple trips up to Michigan to visit various relatives, and they wouldn't go see these kids. They didn't stop and see him. They didn't call him and tell him that they were even there on their way out of town, and sometimes not even then. So this isn't this happy family, that they were trying to portray, and can't find this information. If they did anything with cell phone pings in these supposed towns where he met these Amish people. But it's the 10-year anniversary, and so there's a reporter who's just put out a book, and he's someone that had worked on the case from the beginning, and so the book's called 76 Minutes. I haven't read it, but he focuses again on that baseball, and I guess there's a wooded area on the other side of the river down near Holiday City. That place floods a lot, so it wasn't thoroughly searched at the time. And so he's trying to orchestrate, a more intense search of the area. And I keep thinking about this baseball because kind of getting a sense of the mind of this guy, I think it's a clue. I don't think the kids are actually right there by the baseball. I think maybe it's pointing at something. Maybe he said it in such a way that a certain letter in the word of the manufacturer is pointing to an area to give him a clue as to where he can go back and find them if he needs to. Because he's just very deceptive. So I think there's something there, but I don't think it's something that you would automatically notice on the surface. I think it's a clue. And again, I hate to say it, but I think he did something. Now, it occurs to me that the oldest child at this point now would be 19. So these aren't little kids anymore. But certainly in the case of the 19-year-old, he's now ready for college, the military, whatever he wants to do. Why hasn't this kid popped up? If his dad did him this big favor, why hasn't he now come back and contacted his dad and reached out and said, hey, just wanted to, let you know how my life turned out or whatever. And, the reverse as well. If the dad is lying, which I think he is, why hasn't the kid contacted the mom? It gives some hope that the remains were never found, but it doesn't rule out murder. And it just seems to me that something would have happened by now. If he's so regretful that he did this and wishes he could take it all back, why hasn't he blown it wide open? Why hasn't he given the information about these people to the police and helped them retrieve his children? If this story is true and he's now remorseful and wants his kids and misses them so much, it just doesn't add up. He knows supposedly who they are. So, okay, you want him back? Let's do it. But he's not doing that. He's sitting in jail. They got him on parental kidnapping. Then there's another count of kidnapping. And then unlawful imprisonment and contempt. And these charges all together are in like 2 different counties. He got 10 to 15 on the unlawful imprisonment charge. The contempt charge is outstanding, and then these other charges were added in 2011. Some talk in the documentaries about murder charges. And, this is from the police who have seen all the evidence that we haven't seen, and they know what's going on. And they've said that this is definitely a possibility. More indication that it's murder than there is that the kids are somewhere safe. So that's the consensus. And, he was recently denied parole. So I'm not the only one who thinks that he's probably guilty. So just a couple weird details here now. So his father, John Skelton's father, said in an interview that someone approached him from behind and said, "Don't turn around." Then said, "I know your plight and your sons are fine," and vanished. Okay. He lives in Florida. These people are supposedly in Ohio or Indiana or somewhere in some Amish community. So, first of all, they're not his sons, they're his grandsons. But second of all, we're supposed to believe that they drove, flew, hitchhiked, took their horse and buggy to Florida just to say this one sentence to this guy and then disappeared. You can't send a letter? I mean, you're gonna... I'm sorry. I just don't buy it. And then there was a weird twist where they found the remains of 3 young children in a shed in Missoula, Montana. I did look into that because after several months of DNA testing, they came out and said it's not these boys. And I was like, well, who was it? So we did go back and look at that. Apparently the bones were like 99 years old. One of them, they said, seemed to be a Native American child. And they couldn't tell on the other two, but they gave approximate ages. There just wasn't enough there to really get any DNA, but they are still trying to work on it and see if they can find more information about who it was. And that hasn't come out yet anywhere that I can find, because it's a college that's working on this in their lab. So there was that. The other little detail that I kind of wonder about is at least two of the boys had asthma. So what's up with that? You have to take them to the doctor to get their prescriptions. And I mean, they make you do this like every 3 months, even though it's a lifelong condition, which is kind of frustrating for parents of asthmatics. But how are they getting their medication? You know, if they're alive somewhere, you know how many missed opportunities that is every 3 months for 10 years of trying to get their inhalers without anyone seeing them? I don't know. And he even at some point, where he says, may God and Tanya forgive me. Well, what does God need to forgive you for? Not for having a spat with your wife or cutting the cords on the appliances. So if you're asking for God's forgiveness, it's not for breaking the dishes. And he did even tell this pastor lady at some church he used to go to that he basically killed the kids, like that I took them home to heaven, or so. I can't remember how he worded it, but then he later came and said, no, he was kidding because he was angry with her because, I don't know, she wasn't on his side or something. But who could even bring themselves to say those words if they're not true? It's just very twisted. And the other thing is, they had other siblings. These weren't the only kids. Like, we see them together all the time, but there was a couple older sisters from the mom, and I think an older brother as well. And then John Skelton also had, I know, an older daughter, and then I know how many other kids. And so he's victimized all of these people, not just the actual victims. Certainly not on the same level, but it's just, I don't know. So anyway, at this point, he's got about 4.5 to 5 years left, and there was some indication that they do plan on letting him out at that point. And, the manipulation just continues. They finally had the divorce hearing, and this guy represented himself, and you can just hear him in the courtroom taunting their mother. Well, how does it feel to be away from your children? And why do you think that your husband did this? And it was just a circus. It was just an opportunity for him to hurt more people. So that's all I have for now. We'll kind of be watching to see if and when this new search takes place. So thanks for watching. Good night and God bless.